Welcome to Trinity Church of Austin. My name is Sid Hall and I'm Trinity's lead minister. We are all yearning to be back together. We're so tired of this isolation and the inability to reconnect with each other physically. But we are taking the pandemic seriously here at Trinity, listening to the CDC, listening to the local authorities, trying to follow science over what is our impulse. And that means that we're going to be meeting virtually for a while longer. So we know it's difficult, but we're glad that you're joining with us today in our virtual service. Phone numbers for texting prayer requests, a downloadable order of worship, email addresses for Pastoral Care, and instructions for supporting Trinity are all found in the YouTube video below. And from time to time you will see that also in the messaging down below the video. We also will have a time for prayer later, and the way we've been doing it in our virtual service is to actually text those prayers in. And you can start that right now. We will do that through the prayer time, and so feel free to put those prayers in your text. And if for some reason during the prayer time your prayer does not get heard or repeated or made it through to the phone, you can always type that into the chat. This week we're in a second week of our new stewardship series entitled Change Begins at Home. And today's focus is on time. And the title of today's sermon is sort of playfully reconnecting with an old song. Time is on our side. Yes, it is. At the end of our welcome time, we will light a candle. And that is a way to create sacred space together. If you happen to have a candle at home, please bring that out now and let that be something that you can join in at the end of the welcome with me. At Trinity Church of Austin, we want you to know that no matter who you are, who you love, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcome here. Welcome, my friends, to the celebration.
I'm Tim Brace, Music Director at Trinity Church of Austin. For our threshold moment for this series, we are singing Where I Stand is Holy, a traditional Native American chant with added verses attributed to Barbara Clark. The ground under our feet, our body, thoughts, emotions, and our life and our work are all holy, encircled by the divine. Please stand in body and or spirit, and let us sing together.
Where I stand is holy, holy is the ground. Forest, mountain, river, listen to the sound. Great Spirit circles all around me. Who I am is holy, holy are we. Body, thought, emotion, connecting you and me. Great Spirit circles all around me. Do is holy, holy is my way. Life and work together, celebrate the day. Great Spirit circles all
Trinity! We miss you! We're the Carlson family, and we are proud Trinity members, even though we have moved all the way to Northfield, Minnesota. We know that you're talking about change beginning at home, and our family has had a lot of change. One of the big things is we just moved to Minnesota. We have this beautiful house, Northfield, Minnesota. And we've been talking about how can we affect change in our community when it's a new community and during a pandemic. And we have a couple of things that we've done that we'd love to share with you. Lucy, what's one of the ways that we can make change at home?
We made new friends and invited them in our backyard while wearing masks to play.
Inviting new friends to play, great. Zaida?
We go and protest for Black Lives Matter.
We express who we want to vote for by having yard signs in our yard.
And then another thing that some of our family members do is we have been writing sidewalk check messages every Thursday morning downtown Northfield for Black Lives Matter and for remembering people that we want to recognize and we think their lives are important. And then also, Andrew and I have registered to vote in Minnesota, and we're going to make sure that we vote and that we encourage other people to vote. So those are the ways that we've thought of. All of these are messages of love and anti-racism and inclusion, and the messages that we learned while we were at Trinity, and we continued those messages here in our new home. And we hope that during this time, you all are doing well. We miss you. We hope everyone has a great first couple weeks back at school. We'll be thinking of all of you. All right. Love you, Trinity.
Bye. Bye.
Today I'd like to lead you in a short sound meditation. This is a practice where you either concentrate on certain sounds such as music, or open your ears and mind to whatever ambient sounds present themselves to you during your meditation time, staying aware of those sounds as they move in and out of your consciousness, your oral space. Let's do that today. First, relax, breathe consciously but not too deeply. Close your eyes. Now, open yourself to the sounds around you as they come and go. Notice how whatever you hear attracts your attention. Name what that is, and stay with it until something else comes to replace it, or perhaps it moves away on its own. There might be several sounds happening simultaneously, making a kind of dynamic collage as the sounds move over and through each other, each having its own brief life in your mind. You can think of these as spiraling energy that moves through you. If your mind wanders and you notice that, relax, come back to your breath, and begin again. Take a breath and let us begin. When you're ready, open your eyes. Take another breath, relax your body and your mind. This is a wonderful practice to do. I love to do it on the porch or outside, but anywhere will do. It's a good way to be present in the moment and to become aware of sounds that you might not normally pay attention to. We also become aware of the impermanence of the thoughts and feelings and sounds that move through our minds and our bodies. Thank you for your time.
I'm Mark Moore. I'm the Associate Minister here at Trinity. And this is the time that we hear your prayers. This has always been an important part of our worship, whether we're sitting in a circle in the sanctuary at Trinity or sitting in our living rooms at home. And we'll take this time to sit with your prayers. If you don't text your prayer to be read aloud, or if we get to the end of our prayer time, feel free to type your prayer in the YouTube video chat box. I invite you now into a time and an attitude of prayer. Are there prayers that you would offer now for our lives and for our community? Please text your brief prayer to 512-766-3123. Prayers for the healing of Terry Shook, who is hospitalized with dehydration. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. We pray for Trinity as we work on doing anti-racist actions and study me and white supremacy in the coming weeks. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Pray for a coworker at EWCC as we continue to face challenging circumstances daily. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers for the family and friends of Nancy Lamb. Prayers of thanks for her life of service, especially to the elderly. She died of COVID-19 2 weeks ago. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers for an Aunt Adrian being transferred to dementia care from Stephanie. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. For Cindy, who is struggling with myeloma. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. I pray we may continue to believe in redemption for those people we feel have done great damage to our country. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. For Leah Stavenhagen and her family. Prayers for the Tankersley Glenn family, that we can see our way to forgiveness. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. From Gabriel, I pray that people take care of the world. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Let us hold these prayers and those cradled in the silence of our hearts in a moment of silence. In this series, we focus our prayers on the meditations of creation-centered mystics. I invite you to be in the spirit of prayer as we reflect on the wisdom of Rabbi al-Adawiya, a 9th century Sufi Muslim mystic. She wrote, "Your prayers are your light. Your devotion is your strength. Sleep is the enemy of both. Your life is the only opportunity that life can give you. If you ignore it, you waste it. You will only turn to dust." Amen.
Our song of reflection for this series is Wisdom Circling, based on the words of Hildegard von Bingen, with music by David Marks, former music director here at Trinity Church of Austin and current choir director at St. Andrew's Presbyterian. Mark Boyden has created a new video for us featuring a body prayer by Dave Robinson, Kara Lewis, and Light German, and our choir gathering virtually to sing with you. Please stand in body and/or spirit and join us.
Wisdom circling, enclosing us all. Wisdom circling, one life-giving path. Wisdom circling, enclosing us all. Wisdom circling, one life-giving path. Wisdom circling, enclosing us all. Wisdom circling, one life-giving path. Wisdom circling, enclosing us all. Wisdom circling, one life-giving path.
Good morning, Trinity Church of Austin family. My name is Stephanie Molnar, and I'm very pleased that Trinity Church of Austin, with its commitment to justice and inclusion, has been part of my life for well more than a decade, and I'm very privileged to bring the first reading to you this morning. These are selections from Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The words of the preacher Kohelet. "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher, "vanity of vanities. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes, and a generation comes, But the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. I, the preacher, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity and a chasing after wind.
Good morning, Trinity. This is Sarah Matt. You may remember me as the mother of the crazy 4 boys, Logan, Lamar, Leaf, and Lincoln, and then my husband is the intern, Gus Lott. Right now we're in upstate New York where it's actually quite chilly, hence the fleece. So today I'm going to be reading from Alan Lightman, Einstein's Dreams. Some who have witnessed the future do all they can to refute it. A youth embarks on a vigorous sailing voyage with his father after a vision that his father will die soon of heart trouble. A young woman allows herself to fall in love with one man, even though she has seen that she will marry another. Such people stand on their balconies at twilight and shout that the future can be changed, that thousands of futures are possible. The father dies of his heart, and his son hates himself for not forcing his father to keep to his bed. The young woman is deserted by her lover and marries a man who will let her have solitude with her pain. Who would fare better in this world of fitful time? Those who have seen the future and live only one life? Or those who have not seen the future and wait to live life? Or those who deny the future and live 2 lives?
Lately, I've been spending some time going through old files with the intent of tossing out a bunch of things that I haven't looked at in years. And of course, when you do that, you find stuff that you didn't remember that you had. And one of the curious things that I found was a list of goals that I set in the midst of seminary. They were very simple. They were finish my seminary degree, have children, get my doctorate, and write my first book. And I remember sort of that period. I've always been a goal setter, and that's sort of how I do things. I've done it since I was young. My parents were entrepreneurial, and I have always been that way too. But it's weird when you read goals like that and you realize I was so young and so inexperienced with life, and I really was curious about what happened with those goals. Well, I did graduate from seminary and then proceeded to have 2 children. What I didn't count on was how having children would change all the other goals that you set. So I did eventually get my doctorate. I did eventually write a book, but they were not on the time frame that I had laid out because I had learned to put measurable goals too. And the measure was the date. Well, I missed the dates completely. And it was a reminder to me how time is always so elusive. We think we have it or we think we don't have it, and yet it feels like it is the container, the confines of our life. We are from the cradle to the grave, a part of a timeline, a journey from this point to that point, and we never know how long that is. This month is Stewardship Month at Trinity, and one of the traditional ways of talking about how we are stewards of the church and stewards of the world is to think in terms of how we organize our time and how we channel our talents and how we present to the world for change, for our values, our treasures. And this week we're talking about time. And I've been reflecting all week on the issue of time and realized that we all have different ways of relating to it. Some of us like sitting down with timesheets through our day. Some of us look in terms of what are our goals for the day, and did we get those accomplished? And if not, why not? And what can carry over for the next day or the next week? And if you haven't guessed, that's my typical way of doing that. And so as a lead pastor, I'm not as concerned with the timesheets with folks, although I get with hourly folks you have to do that. I'm concerned about, here are the goals that we set. How are we doing with those goals? Are we accomplishing them? If not, why not? Did we have an unrealistic timeline? Did we have unrealistic resources? What was it that prevented that? And if they did work, why? And what can we do to replicate that? And that sort of thing. So we're always looking at time in some way. My Fitbit is obsessed with time. It says, Sid, not in vocal words, but it clearly in the words of almost like a conscience, Sid, you're not walking enough today. You need to get your steps. Or I wake up in the morning and it's got a timesheet essentially that says how I slept, how long I slept, whether I had deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, or was awake. And I often think, surely that can't be accurate. And who knows if it is. But regardless, it provides a template for me to reflect on my sleeping habits, my day, my walking, etc. In the New Testament, we see Jesus talking about time too. And he talks about how the day or the hour is never known of when the end will come. In those days, they believed that there was an inevitable apocalyptic type consummation that was going to be happening soon. And there were those in Jesus' life that wanted to know, teacher, tell us when this is going to be. And he let his disciples know that, I've got some wisdom, I've got some experience, I've got some things that I can teach you, but I can't teach you that, because time is something that none of us control. It is beyond any of us. There's a wonderful movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it's based on the Odyssey and Homer's great epic poem. And if you look at it, you can see even characters that line up with people in Homer's poem. And one of those in Homer is Tiresias. And Tiresias was blind. Tiresias was considered a sage, almost like a sage of fate. He wasn't exactly Kronos, but he reflected the words and the philosophy of Kronos. So when our main characters in O Brother, Where Art Thou? Encounter this blind seer moving a hand cart on a railway, they want to know if they can hitch a ride with him. And he does give them a ride for a little while, but then he lets them know that they have their own ride to go on, their own journey. But he gives them some advice. He says, I have no name. You will find fortune, though it will not be the fortune you seek. And then he goes on and says a few other things. And then he says this, and this is where you get clued into the Odyssey a little bit. he says, fate has vouchsafed your reward. In other words, you think you're in control. You think you are in charge of this destiny, but maybe you're not. Maybe there are factors that you can't count on, including time. What's interesting is in Greek mythology, Tiresias was not only blind, and he was sort of an opposite. He reminded you of the third gender in Native American spirituality. He was blind, but he could see like no one else. He understood the world. He even changes his gender in the mythology, from male to female, back to male. And so there was this sense that he lived between the worlds. And to live between the worlds is to have this wisdom that says, time is not something we can control. If you look in the Hebrew Scriptures, the last book that we know of that was written before it became known as the Bible among the Jewish people was the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is where we get the wonderful song by Pete Seeger, done by the Byrds, Turn, 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 where everything there's a season. But Koheleth, known as the preacher, which is what the book is actually called in Hebrew, has some advice that he gives us. He says this: what do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? In other words, he wants the community to ponder this question: why are you here? What are you doing? Are you awake or are you not awake? How much control do you have? Or what do you have control of, even if you don't have control of some things? And then he says, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. In other words, you think you're special, and you may be unique, and there, yes, has never been anyone like you in the universe, and there never will be again. But there are certain rules and principles that you are bound by in this universe. And what you will discover very quickly is that things happen even as you're standing watching it go by. And there's a lot you don't have control over. But here's the thing that's curious. Jesus and the early writers of the New Testament, and we see this also among the rabbis of the Talmud and Mishnah period, which was sort of the Jewish equivalent of the New Testament happening around the same time, spent a lot of time talking about different kinds of time, that there were two kinds of time. There was what's called chronos, where we see that, and especially in a story like the Odyssey. And there was also kairos. Chronos is that linear time, that thing that moves from point A to point B, that is the cradle to the grave, or whatever path we carve out in the midst of that for this task or that task. And kairos was something altogether different. And what's interesting is that even in Homer's Odyssey, you see that people thought they could determine the chronos, and they couldn't. Things were going to happen in a way that fate has occurred no matter what. But kairos, how you interpret that, how you live in that, how you interact in the moment, time out of time, you do have control over. It is your choice. It is almost like a tear in the fabric of chronos. that you can step through just for a moment. A tear that allows you to enter into a different world. When Jesus says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you," he was providing a tear in the chronos for us to step through into something new. And why is that important? Because chronos, as it happens, as time happens, we often feel like we've been thrown into some tear in the fabric anyway. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in the midst of a political season like we've never seen before. We're in the midst of a great fear about the world and our economy and healthcare, and will the racial violence, the racial unrest, the racial pain that is in this country end? Will women be able to get through the glass ceiling of a major presidential or vice presidential wall that's been there forever? We have these tears that have happened. And so what Jesus wants us to know is that in the midst of that, we can still determine something, and that is love. He says that Paul wrote that the greatest is love, and Jesus constantly pointed out that the whole law can be summed up in love. And so over and over we see these opportunities for people to know that even if you can't control this, and even if you can't control that, and along this journey, life has got you down, there are still ways that you can look at it. In college, reading Viktor Frankl was like a revelation to me. I absolutely knew, even as a young college student, that I had never experienced anything in my life like the Holocaust. And I probably never would, hopefully. And that most of us can't imagine that kind of absolute tear in the fabric of our life where everything is thrown out of balance. Some people do experience that even now. Most of us don't. But what struck me is that how Viktor Frankl, even in the midst of that, was able to step through that tear that had happened and see the world differently, see the world in a way that gave him power, that empowered his inner self, even though he had no power to control anything that was going on the outside. How do people do that? I'm still learning. Why wasn't that one of the goals that I set when I was in my mid-20s? To be like Viktor Frankl. But I'm learning. I think that life teaches you how to do some of that. One of my favorite writers of the modern era is someone my son put me on to, Alan Lightman. Lightman, who wrote The Accidental Universe and a wonderful book called Mr. G, also wrote a book called Einstein's Dreams. And in Einstein's Dreams, and by the way, Lightman is a physicist and a writer. As some of you have heard me say when I've talked about him before, he likes to say that when he was at MIT, he would teach physics in the morning, walk across campus, and then teach creative writing in the afternoon. So Lightman is a physicist that knows how to write, so he's accessible to someone like me who absolutely does not think like a physicist. And one of the creative books that he wrote was one called Einstein's Dreams, where he imagines Einstein working in the patent office in Switzerland, and in his spare moments writing down possible theories of how time works, coming up with his theory of relativity, What we see is relativity and go, wow, what a genius idea that broke through the whole barrier that was set in motion by Copernicus and Newton especially, into a whole different way of seeing things. And I think physicists now, some are even challenging relativity, or at least taking it to its next level of possibility, in a way that Einstein, I think, would be proud. But what we forget is that Einstein was trying on different ideas, all sorts of different ideas. So Lightman sort of makes these up. And so each chapter is like a different scenario of how time can work. It almost reads like, each chapter reads like a different episode of The Twilight Zone, or even Star Trek, in sort of the challenge to your mind and how things think. But here's the reading that you heard a few moments ago. Here's the part that I wanted to emphasize, that Lightman says through the words of Einstein about this particular scenario of time. He says, "Who would fare better in this world of fitful time? Those who have seen the future and live only one life, or those who have not seen the future and wait to live life, or those who deny the future and live two lives?" We're seeing each of those scenarios today. We see people who desire to see the future, because then they figure they can make everything work. And you know what? I get that. I'd like to know what comes around the bend. I'd like to know to some extent. Although I say that, but I'm not sure I'd want to know if I was going to have Alzheimer's. I'm not sure I'd want to know that I was going to possibly get this terrible disease or something like that. I'd rather just deal with it as it came about. But there are some that would wish for that. And I want that certainly in little things. It would be nice to know right now, without a doubt, that no one in my family, no one in this Trinity church is going to die of COVID. I would really, really like to know that. But I can't know that, and neither can you. And so we don't have that possibility. And then there's the third scenario that he provides, or those who deny the future and live two lives. We're seeing a lot of that too. And I think that many who deny the future are those who are terribly oppressed in this future that we're living in the moment, and don't know how to get out of it. The tear has happened in the fabric, and they've been tossed through, and they can't find their footing. They can't find their way. And so their best way to survive the pain of that moment is to deny the present and deny the future. But the third alternative is Lightman's second. He says, or those who have not seen the future and wait to live life. That's even more tempting. If you don't see the future, then, well, you just wait around until it happens. But none of those three alternatives, and I think this is what Lightman is implying, ultimately really works. What works is that we recognize that none of us have control over this thing called Chronos. But what we do have is control over that time out of time, how we can live in the midst of Chronos and see the fullness of time. It's really about living in the moment. It's that realization that we don't really know the future. We can't make up what's next, no matter how well calculated. no matter how neatly we have planned our goals with their measurable objectives. We can't do that. It's just not possible. And in some sense, the past is not real either. We're always interpreting the past through the present. And so when I tell the same story that my sisters tell, for instance, from our childhood, sometimes you think we grew up in different families. It's because not only did we experience it differently then, but we've had different life experiences up to the present that changes the way we interpret those events. That's just normal. But what if, in the tear of the moment, in the rip in the fabric, in the disruption of Chronos, we can decide how this time, this moment, this day creates an opportunity for love, for justice, for beauty. When I think about stewardship, that's what I think of in terms of time. Time is on our side. Yes, it is. Now, if we're looking at Chronos, we say, that's not on our side. In fact, time is against everything. We're getting older, can't control the future, we don't know what's around the corner. So time is not on our side unless we're in denial, unless we've done one of these other options that Lightman has Einstein saying. But what if this moment is on our side? This moment right now, that changes everything. And I believe it is on our side. So in terms of stewardship, in terms of how we see ourselves as stewards of the earth, of each other in community, whether that's our neighborhood, our school, our kids' school, our family, or even our church. What does it mean to live in the midst of that uncertainty and yet find beauty, live for love, create justice? That is something powerful. That blind seer in O Brother, Where Art Thou? Starts off at the beginning of the movie, and guess what? We see him at the end. And the three guys who sort of blew him off because he just seemed like a weirdo at the beginning had a little more wisdom about what he was all about at the end. Remember what he said: you will find fortune, though it will not be the fortune you seek. Friends, I invite you to be stewards of time. Time out of time. Not the kind you control, not the kind you can schedule, but even when the schedule goes awry, even when the best laid plans fall apart, there is a moment in time, or as you've often heard, the wrinkle in time, where you can step through and actually live in what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. That's my dream for you and for our community at Trinity and for the impact that we can have on the world. It happens now in this time. Amen.
Our song of response today is Take the Time by Miriam Therese Winter. Sister Winter has been writing biblical songs and hymns since the 1960s. She served on the editorial panel for the New Century Hymnal for the United Church of Christ in 1995. We have sung several of her songs in our services, including Mother and God and Wellspring of Wisdom. Her lyrics are and have always been fully inclusive. She says about her work, I believe that in the beginning of our spirit-led journey, love sang life into being with a liberating word. The final lines of the Medical Mission Sisters Constitution says, "Our journey into the mystery of God is linked to the journey of all of Earth's people. Our yearning for God is one with our hunger for the transformation of the world." Take the Time is a song we've sung before. I think you'll pick up the melody quickly. Please stand in body and or spirit, and let us sing together.
Take the time to sing a song for all those people who don't belong. The women wasted by defeat, the men condemned to walk the street, the down and out we'll never meet. Take the time to say a prayer for all those people who face despair, the starving multitudes who pray to make it through another day, who watch their children slip away. Take the time to hear the plea of every desperate refugee, the millions who have had to flee the lands, their loves, their liberty, who turn in hope to you and me. Take the time to take a stand for peace and justice in every land, where power causes deep unrest. Come take the part of the oppressed, and then, says God, you will be blessed.
Now is the time that we bring forth our offerings. In our worship space at Trinity, we always have two opportunities for our offerings: a wooden bowl for the support of the programs and ministries of Trinity. And Trinity remains committed to the health and well-being of the whole community. We remain committed to following the advice and guidance of health professionals and scientists, even as we all yearn to embrace this beloved community and to act in typical Trinity fashion to support those in need, those who are oppressed, and those who are made invisible. Your support of Trinity is critical for us to meet the commitment that we made to put the well-being of this community and this broader community first in our hearts and in our actions. And that means to continue worshiping online a while longer, and to continue paying the dedicated folks who work with our children and our hourly staff, and to making our facilities available to Hope Food Pantry. And we also have a woven basket for a special offering. And this week it's for the pastor's discretionary account. These funds are available to the senior minister as a resource to utilize for the aid to individuals and others in immediate need. We've recently used the pastor's discretionary account to send assistance to members and friends of Trinity who are in need during this pandemic. Now, there are several methods by which you can give to Trinity today. You can visit our website at www.trinitychurchofaustin.org and then click the support tab and scroll down that page to find the options there. You may download the Give Plus mobile app from either iTunes or Google Play, and you may also text your offering to 512-967-0292 and add the keyword special to support the pastor's discretionary account. And if you want to give to both the general fund and the special offering, send two texts, one with the keyword special and one without. Please send Trinity your most generous offerings.
Hey Trinity, it's Gus, your pastoral intern. I have a few announcements before we end the service today. As always, you can reach out to Pastoral Care, either by calling Sid's cell phone directly, and that number is down in the description of this video, or you can email pastoralcare@trinitychurchofaustin.org. And that email just goes to Mark, Sid, myself, and Joe, just the pastoral staff directly. They're the only ones who read that email. It's coming up on stewardship time at Trinity. Please consider a donation of your time, treasure, or talents. Information on how you can make a pledge for this year to support the church is down in the description of this video, as well as in the email update. There's an anti-racism church-wide meeting coming up that you can still sign up for. The topic is called Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. And sign-up links are down in the description and in the email update as well. And finally, we're still having our Thursday morning virtual coffees with Sid at 10:30 a.m. That's a Google Hangout where you come and talk and check in, see how everybody's doing. I know these are extraordinary times, and it's a nice way to get together with a cup of coffee in hand and catch up with some of the Trinity family. So that's again, Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. That's all that I have, and happy back to school week. I know my kids went back this week, and it's quite a challenge, and I'm back in seminary, missing being with all you guys for sure. I'll now hand it over to Sid for the benediction.
And now may the peace of God go with us. May the power of God sustain us. And may the love of God keep us together forever. Amen.
Let us hesitate no longer in our doubt and our dismay. There's a power at work within us that has promised a new day, and the time will surely come, it will not be long delayed, when God